Hello, welcome back. This is Deborah Giesling with the Mama Bear Diaries, where we're going to undo everything you learned about schizophrenia from the television show Criminal Minds. This is episode 2. We are doing a primer of sorts about serious mental illness. I am not a doctor, I'm a mom. So don't take anything I say here as medical advice, because it's not. Here's my oldest son again, still on my phone, but I think it sounds good. All right, here we go. So today we're going to tackle a pretty sensitive topic, involuntary treatment. But before I do that, I just wanted to give a little personal update. The last 2 episodes I made, my first ones, my husband was doing well, but since that time, a few weeks ago, he had 2 small heart attacks over a weekend, and we ended up calling the ambulance, and they took him in and did some tests, and he had significant blockage. So 3 days later, he had open heart surgery. He had a quintuple, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. He had 5 of his arteries bypassed. So he is recovering and he's doing well. It's just going to take him time, as you can imagine. And I'm really grateful that he's still with us and God spared him. And we can just keep going with what we're doing. Also, I want to let you know, in a couple of weeks, I was invited to be on a podcast, and I did some recordings, and it's going to air with 3 different episodes. It'll be released over 3 weeks, and it's our story about how we got care for our son who lives with schizophrenia. And our church is hosting this, Center Church. It's the Center Church Fixed on Jesus podcast. And our church is a huge part of that story. We would not be standing, I would not be here right now if it wasn't for Center Church. So I can't wait for you to meet them. And I can't wait for you to hear more of our story. I'm a little bit more candid than I have probably ever been. I'm not comfortable with that. But if we don't tell our stories, things aren't going to get better. And we're going to believe that the Criminal Minds holds a corner on, everything about schizophrenia, and they're dead wrong about it. So here we go. If this topic is difficult for you, if you are somebody who has a serious mental illness and this has happened to you, you've been petitioned and gone through the involuntary court process, and I can totally understand if you're not going to want to listen to this, but I'm going to be very careful about it because I understand how hard that must have been for you. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. I really am. And I'm sorry also for families who've had to do it. No, it's not pleasant for anyone involved. It's very emotional and difficult. And so I'm going to talk through that a little bit right now. Let's get started on it. So I talked last time about a group of people within the SMI category who have something known as anosognosia. It's not denial. It's not being stubborn. It's really the brain is not working right. It's not reasoning right and doesn't understand. People don't understand that they have a mental illness or have a need to get help and take part of treatment to get better. And so someone else has to advocate for them. Now, all over the country, in every county and state, this is implemented different, if it's even implemented at all, which is very sad. And if we had lived in any other county, any other state, I don't think our son would be doing as well as he's doing right now. So I live in Maricopa County, and there was a lawsuit brought against the state in the 80s. It's the infamous lawsuit known as Arnold versus Sarn. And it said basically the state was not providing services and care that were adequate for people that live with serious mental illness. And so it forced our state to put in some really stronger laws, civil commitment laws, and bones in place, a process for people an on-ramp to get into treatment. And it also brought in more ACT teams, assertive community treatment teams. There are more intense teams that they have less of a caseload. There's 6 people on that team, and they work with a psychiatrist, and they work with individuals who are more acute and have higher needs at the clinics. And so we could certainly use more ACT teams. I'll tell you that right now, and more training in our ACT teams. But we do have good bones, good laws here in our state. And so what that looks like is if your loved one is really struggling, it's usually psychosis, and they are becoming a danger to self or danger to others. This is one of 2 ramps we have here in Arizona. So the first one is danger to self, danger to others, DTODTS. That is if they are threatening to harm themselves or threatening to harm someone else. They're putting themselves in danger. Anyone who's observed this can go to a clinic. It's an evaluation center. There's 3 of them in Maricopa County. One is in Mesa called CBI. Another one is the Urgent Psychiatric Center, which is in downtown Phoenix. And then there is another one, Recovery Interventions, in Peoria. So we have them spread out over the valley. And you can go down there, fill out a piece of paper explaining what is going on, what kind of behaviors are they exhibiting. And if you're even considering this, that person is it's very clear. It's not a question that they need help and they need intervention. And so you go fill that paper out, you leave it there at that clinic. It goes before a judge within the next few hours, and they look at what you've written down, and they say, yes, this person is a candidate to be brought in for evaluation. And what they do is, depending on where that person lives, if they're with you or whatever their address is, they will call the police in the city, who will send their next available out. And so and this is the hard part, because you don't know when they're going to come. So say your loved one is really deep in psychosis, and they are starting to become dangerous, saying things, threatening things, then you've just got to wait there after you filled this out and waited. And then the police will come, and they usually send a CIT, crisis intervention trained police officer out, and they will come to the door and they will talk to that person. I've always seen it done very kindly. And unfortunately, they've got to handcuff them and put them in the back of a police car. Again, none of this is pleasant. My husband is a big John Wayne guy, and when we've had to walk through this process, we're devastated. We're left in tears, crying, holding each other after this process. I'm telling you, it is not fun. It's not fun for the person, and it's not fun for the family. And so they take that person and they take them to the evaluation center, where they are held for 72 hours. They typically don't count the weekends, so there's a little bit of a leeway if it's on a weekend. And they are seen, and they are determined whether, okay, this person needs further consideration for court-ordered treatment, and they will be transferred when and if the next bed is available at one of 2 hospitals here in the Valley that have a mental health court. And this is the clincher. This is where a lot of people fall off. If there is no bed available and that 72 hours runs up, then typically they end up just releasing them to the streets. And so approximately 300 people that are going through this process per month are getting released to the street. Now, that's not the evaluation center's fault. That's our system. That's our lack of beds. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So, but if it's all working right, and they transfer them to the Valleywise Hospital, there's one in Mesa, and I think there's one in Maryvale if it's still open. That one has closed and opened back and forth for different reasons. And so they're taken there. They are seen by 2 psychiatrists, and if they determine, yes, this person meets the criteria, they should be placed on court-ordered treatment, the person will be assigned a legal defense. So they have representation, they have rights. and there is a court process. And the family or friend or whoever who has filed the petition, observed, the behaviors, they have to testify, and often it's right in front of that person. So again, it's just there's nothing pleasant about this, and it's very difficult to have to share what that person has been doing in front of them right there in the courtroom. And so this is basically a little hearing, and then the judge decides, yes, this person will benefit from court ordered treatment, and they place that person on, we call it COT for short. So that basically what that means is that person must stay in treatment for a year. And if they go off their medications, they don't go to their appointments, then they can be placed back in the hospital. And the individual, is not really wanting to go back to the hospital. So they, for the most part, will comply. And if they don't, again, they go back. And so then they're typically released when they're stabilized, and it's never enough. It's never long enough. I've never seen it be long enough. And they are assigned to a clinic within Maricopa County. That's how it works here in our county. And they are required to have follow-up, and at that point you should be able to, you try to advocate to get on the ACT team. It's just there's a lot of pieces there, a lot of moving parts. Now, another on-ramp is called a PAD petition, which is persistently and acutely disabled. This one takes a little bit longer. It's a little bit more difficult to show that your loved one is persistently and acutely disabled. But for an example, it could be, they are living on the streets and their feet are getting all torn up or infected. Because we live in the desert here. They have no shoes on, and they're not eating, they're not drinking. And so you can petition the court under a PAD petition if you don't have evidence or they're not showing danger to self or danger to other. So that is one on-ramp that is possible, and I've seen people get help that way as well. For an example, I knew a woman, the mother testified to this, so I'm not saying anything private. Her daughter was living on the street, and they didn't know where she was, but she found her because she called her mother and said, "Could you please bring me some super glue? My two front teeth have come out." And what happened was is she was assaulted on the street, and she was also punched in the mouth, and her teeth fell out. So that's how her mother, that would be somebody who definitely qualifies for a PAD petition. And if you struggle with that and you think this process is not kind, maybe we need to talk offline a little bit. If you think having a woman live out there like that, vulnerable to sexual and physical assault versus getting treatment and getting help, if you think that is more compassionate, then we need to talk about that. That woman right now is doing so well because her mother was able to take her through this process and get her into services and advocate for her. It doesn't just stop when they get on court order treatment or get assigned to a clinic. You've got to really stay involved as an advocate all along the way to ensure they're getting the services that they have a right to and that they need. We'll talk about those other things another day, but that in a nutshell is our county, our state. And it's very sad to me that a lot of places don't even have this, or they have laws on the books, but nobody enforces or implements them. And so the lawsuit really did a huge service here in Arizona, and our loved ones have been able, as we advocate strenuously for them to get into treatment and get help and get their lives back. I have seen so many people get their lives back through this process. And if I am ever that incapacitated and I'm on the street, I would hope someone would do that for me. And so that's it in a nutshell. It's not perfect, but it's what we've got right now. And a lot of states don't have this because let's do our little policy history background here. I'll just give you one more piece. I'll try to give a piece every single time, and you'll see how this all starts to add up to the current system that we have here now. But in 1963, on Halloween, October 31st, President John F. Kennedy signed the Community Mental Health Act into law. Now, it was well intentioned that we were going to move people out of asylums. Medication was coming on the scene, Thorazine. And so there was kind of this lofty idea that everyone could just live in community. We could just go from custodial care into the community. And it was a great idea. But what happened is, sadly, is our president was assassinated several weeks later. And there was no leadership. There was no follow-up. There were no resources that followed through with this. And so what began there really was intended to be good, turned out to be a hot potato game between the states and the federal government of offloading the responsibility for the sickest mentally ill is what happened. And so that's why you see still today a patchwork of services and court-ordered treatment. Another name for it is assisted outpatient treatment. Treatment Advocacy Center is a strong advocate for assisted outpatient treatment, or AOT for short. They are working behind the scenes in many states and counties with advocates trying to implement these resources for loved ones, because without it, think about it just for a second, without being able to get your loved one, to get that girl off the street who was assaulted and also very mentally ill, what if you have nothing? Well, we can look around in many of our cities and see we've left them to the streets, or they're being put into the criminal justice system. We're paying for it in other ways. We're also paying for it because people are at risk for drug use. They're at risk for violence. And so our communities are paying for it in so many ways. It's so inhumane. When I see people come back and get their lives back with this tool, I just don't understand why we're not doing it and implementing it across the board. So that is one of the historical things that had an impact on our nation. And but anyway, I just wanted to just touch base on that. And if you have any further thoughts or questions about that, or I'm gonna see what I can link in there. I don't know that I have too much to link today, but I will be. I'm totally open to dialoguing with this more, and just want you to know that assisted outpatient treatment saves lives. It gives people their lives back, and that's what we should be in the business of doing. All right. Well, I'm going to send you off. Let's see here. We got to do the outro. Okay, we did the intro. Send you off with the outro. Join me next time on Mama Bear Diaries, where I am actually going to talk about demon possession. I know it's sad that we have to talk about it, but we're going to talk about it briefly. I'm specifically talking to the Christian church, and if you're not interested in that, you can skip that one, but I'm going to touch on it anyway. Thanks for joining me, and got a little message from my sweetie after this. My brown eyes, I love you, and all of this is for you.